I didn't think it was possible. I really didn't. Waking up to a new job, a new career, a new life. I was told to cover the daily news, just whatever was happening, really. I was lucky to have a job. No one else did. They told me I'd be in Berlin, except they didn't tell me it was 1945.
Today is April 16th, 1945. For the past few weeks, things haven't been looking so great for the German army. This morning, the Soviet Red Army reached the banks of the Oder and Neisse rivers to the east of Berlin. And in the west, the Allied front reached the River Elbe.
Many are forecasting that Berlin will fall within the next 3 months. Both sides seem uninterested in Berlin, saying that it is unimportant to post-war Europe. However, through our sources, we believe that Stalin has full interest in the capture of Berlin for their nuclear research program at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute. Stalin's first Belarusian front, under the command of Georgy Zhukov, waits at the Oder, while his first Ukrainian front, under Ivan Konev, is at the Neisse. 3 a.m. Zhukov and Konev attack the German defenses. Zhukov in the east sends heavy artillery at the German line, but the Germans hold their positions. By dawn, nothing has been gained. Only 30,000 Soviets killed, and even higher German casualties. Along the Neisse in the south, Konev advances 8 miles as he pushes through the German defenses with heavy force.
That's all for now. Live from Berlin, I'm Chris Lind. It is April 18th, 1945, and both Soviet generals are making a strong push for Berlin.
Yesterday, Zhukov was determined to break through the Seelau Heights position and make a final push into Berlin. Using reconnaissance aircraft, the Russians tried to find the weak spot in the German line. However, the Soviets were set back by mortar fire and an air raid by the German Luftwaffe. With some help from their own fighter planes, the Soviets defeated the final strike from the Luftwaffe in the war. Today, Zhukov's forces were able to finally push through Seelau Heights. It was an aggressive confrontation and resulted in the pushback of the German front line. In the south, Konev's forces are successfully driving north towards Berlin and northwest to seal off all exits from the city. However, Stalin is still worried that the Western Allies will reach Berlin first, and pushes his generals to move faster. Yesterday, Hitler gave a speech telling the German people to fight long and hard and bring the Bolshevik army to a bloodbath.
Live from Berlin, I'm Chris Lind. It is April 23rd, 1945. Over the past 5 days here in Berlin, the situation has grown increasingly worse. As of the 21st, Russian ground fire can now reach the center of the city.
On the 20th, both Konev and Zhukov reached the outskirts of the city. Before entering, the Allies did one last bombing raid on Berlin, which was a huge embarrassment to Germany as they celebrated Hitler's 50th birthday in a parade. Somehow, there was still hope. Here, he called on the Hitler Youth and senior citizens to defend the city. They would become known as the Volkssturm. On April 22nd, as the Soviet army surrounded Berlin, German defenses were only half constructed. This morning, as Konev and Zhukov's army moved into the suburbs, Hitler became delusional in his bunker, and began to call on non-existent armies to carry out suicidal missions against the Bolsheviks. And from our understanding, the Soviets plan to take the Reichstag in just 1 week.
With the looming threat of a Russian invasion, Berlin is becoming a very dangerous city to be in. Live from Berlin, I'm Chris Lind. It is April 28th. Due to the rapid advance of the Soviet army, we had to relocate our crews to Stendal, west of Berlin. We got out just in time too, because Konev's and Zhukov's army have completely surrounded the city, sealing off all exit routes.
On April 24th, Konev's forces stormed across the Telltale Canal, battling Hitler's Volkssturm. They were only a few miles from the Reichstag. As the Soviets drew closer, the aid stations became overwhelmed with wounded soldiers and civilians. On the 26th, American and Russian forces met south of Berlin in Torgau and celebrated the soon-to-be fall of the Third Reich. The Russian forces, however, settled along the river Elbe, making it impossible for American soldiers to advance into Berlin. As Zhukov pushes into the city with 500,000 men, Konev captures Tempelhof Airport. April 27th. SS tanks are stationed in the Tiergarten to defend the Reichstag. However, Russian tanks don't fare so well due to the German Panzerfausts, their anti-tank guns. In order to seize the Reichstag, the Russians appoint General Vasily Chuikov, who mastered the urban fighting style in Stalingrad. Inside Berlin, there are 3 anti-aircraft towers being used to attack the Russian advance. Because they're made of reinforced concrete, the Russians must endure their fire and move on. Also, there are many civilian reports of Russian soldiers raping women as they move farther into Berlin. By this morning, the German defense has been reduced to an area 7 miles long and 2 miles wide. As Germans begin to realize the end is near, the SS begin to hang and kill anyone who refuses to fight for their country.
With the Reichstag now within distance of ground fire, there is not much hope left for the Nazi regime. Live from Stendal, I'm Chris. It is May 2nd, 1945. Here in Stendal, we have received word that the war in Europe may just be over.
On April 29th, the Soviet army had completely surrounded the Reichstag. As a whole, Berlin is utterly destroyed. At this point, the Soviets feel that they will win the war once they place the Soviet flag on top of the Reichstag building. As many as 15 divisions carry the flag in order to have the honor to symbolize the war's end. With these divisions, the Russians battle on. On April 30th, the Russian artillery is firing at point-blank range on the Reichstag building and the heavily depleted German front line, which now only occupies sporadic parts of the Reichstag property. On this day, the hope of Germans everywhere is destroyed, as Hitler commits suicide in his bunker beneath the city. As the news spreads of the Führer's death, Germans recognize that the end of the Third Reich has arrived. At 6 p.m., the Russians place the flag atop the Reichstag for the world to see. Today, May 2nd, the German High Command emerged from their bunkers and surrendered unconditionally to the Soviet Red Army. The Battle of Berlin has ended.
After nearly 6 years of war in Europe, the Nazis had been defeated in their capital city. In the Battle of Berlin, nearly 575,000 Germans were killed, 120,000 of which were civilians. On the Soviet side, death tolls reached 80,000. Through this battle, the future of Germany would be altered